Hi everybody, my name is Johan.
And I'm Trevor.
And we've just recently returned from the Serengeti Migration Safari. Now, this has been a safari we've been hosting for the last 3 or 4 years. Trevor, it's been your first time heading up to the Serengeti.
Yeah.
We're going to chat a little bit. We've got a list of things that we want to chat through, but we're going to go through that list and then just see sort of where this goes and what we come up with. Trev, first of all, you arrived. I obviously had a group beforehand, and then you arrived the morning at Kia Lodge. What were your initial sort of impressions, or how can I say, what were you looking forward to most on this particular safari?
Sure. I heard that I was hosting the safari pretty much a year ago, just over a year ago. And watched yourself and Marlon host the two last year? One last year.
One last year, yeah.
One last year, and I think just seeing the highlights there, it was quite surreal. I mean, it was pretty action-packed. And so I went into it, I try to keep my expectations low, but obviously with yourself and Marlon constantly chatting about it, I knew that we were in for a good time. So I wanted to try and just manage my expectations so that I could also manage the guests' expectations, because as we all know, each safari is different. And you obviously don't want to build something up too much in your own head as well as in guests' minds. But I had a pretty strong feeling that that it was going to deliver. Yeah.
So just to let you guys know, as Trevor mentioned, we used to run one of these safaris around about the same time, sort of end of February, beginning of March. But because of the high demand for this year, we decided to open up 2 safaris, and that's why we've brought Trevor on board, and you're going to be hosting one with me again next year. So arriving at Kia, it was a bit of a disaster to start off with. There were some strikes in Nairobi, which meant some of the guests' flights or got bumped off flights, and then also some of their luggage got missing. So by the morning when we were supposed to leave for Tarangire, instead of having 6 guests, we had 3.
Half the group was there.
Half the group was there. So I then stayed on at Kia Lodge to then wait for the other 3 guests to arrive. You then carried on to Tarangire. Tell our listeners a little bit more about the drive to Tarangire and then your initial thoughts once you got into the Tarangire National Park.
So I think for myself it was also, I arrived in Nairobi that night before at about 10:30 with missing bags, and that we ended up only getting to the hotel at about 2 in the morning, waking up at 5 in the morning, back at the airport, then flight to Kia, meeting up with the 3 guests that were already there. And I think the drive was quite nice just because it allowed us all, especially with how hectic the travel had been, I think it allowed us all just to take a deep breath, and also then discuss the days to come and what the safari is like, what it's about. So the initial drive was quite nice. I think it's a fairly lengthy drive, if I can remember. The safari was so action-packed, which we'll get into, but it all blends in.
About 4 hours.
It's about 4.5 hours. So having never, I'd been to Tanzania before. I was in Ruaha last year, but never to the Serengeti, never to Tarangire, nothing like that. So I think it was very refreshing, and what I really enjoyed about this whole safari was seeing things for the first time. So having seen pictures of Tarangire, having an idea of what it's like, it doesn't quite prepare you for when you're there. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. We were there for one night. I think arriving in it, it's a very diverse reserve. You've got some nice clearings, but you've also got these beautiful big drainage lines and these massive palm trees. So our focus there was to try and see elephants, spend some time with elephants. It was extremely hot. It was probably the hottest day over the whole trip.
Really?
So it was a warm afternoon, our first afternoon there, but we managed to see some elephants, some lions, and just explore Tarangire for a bit for the afternoon session.
I think the nice thing this year as well, so last year we stayed at a camp outside of the park, outside of Tarangire, which meant that in the afternoons we had to leave a little bit earlier to get out of the park at a given time. And then the next morning we couldn't go in. This year we stayed at Ndovu camp, so it's a new Nasikia camp. I absolutely loved it the first time I went there with Marlon. Look, it's still very new, it still needs to get its character and things. What did you think of the camp? I mean, the rooms
I
are
thought
massive.
thought it was nice and refreshing. Like you said, I think a big plus to it is that you stay inside the park.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I mean, we got to camp 6:30, just after 6:30,
Yeah.
and especially after a long day of traveling,
Yeah.
it was very refreshing to walk into that lodge. Like
Yeah.
you said, it's new. It's still got to develop its own character, but that's not going to take very long at all.
Yeah.
The staff there were also incredible, very
Yeah.
very friendly. You know, for me, traveling, I think one of the biggest things is, okay, yes, the wildlife and the game viewing, but what has a huge impact on myself is staff.
Yeah.
You know, they were friendly. There was always someone there to help you. They joked with you. They smiled. Every single person that you walked past greeted you. So I think for me, that's what has a big impact in the stay. And I think we only spent one night there, but it was really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give you an idea, we used to 2 years ago, we used to actually drive from landing at Kia Lodge, drive all the way through to Ngorongoro, which we used to do, and that was a killer. I remember
That's a long
I
day.
think 2 years ago, Natalie, you were there on that particular trip, but I think it took us like something like 11 hours.
Yeah.
And then I mean, after like a flight and things, it was just an absolute nightmare. So that's why we've included this night in Tarangire, and I think so far it works. Maybe in the future we can even do 2 nights there. That's maybe for 2021. That might be an idea.
I think it's something to consider because, like I mentioned earlier on, it's such a diverse area. It's beautiful, and I think you can spend a bit more time just exploring the area.
Yeah.
I think it's worthwhile.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
But a night also works just to, like you said. I mean, that drive.
Just
if
to
you,
break
if you
it
don't
up.
have that night, it's a long day.
Just to break it up, yeah.
Just to break it up.
So then the next morning, I then went with the other 3 guests. Luckily, all of them arrived, but there were still some bags missing. And just, by the way, I mean, we said it was an absolute disaster, but if it wasn't for our amazing team in the office, the ladies really sort of pulled all the strings. We managed to get everyone's bags. We managed to get everyone on flights. And I think that's one of the big differences when you travel with a company like us. It's not just having experienced guides in the field, it's also having people in the office that know the logistics like the back of their hand and can really make all of that work. We then met up at the gate at Ngorongoro, and then one of the first things we did was went to the viewing platform that overlooks the whole Ngorongoro Crater.
Yeah.
What were your feelings when you see the crater for the first time?
The crater's always been a bucket list destination for me. And once again, you see all these photos and it looks absolutely magnificent. So meeting up at the gate, we had lunch and everything, and I was like a little kid with ants in my pants.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get there and see what it's like, see what it's all about. And it's quite the drive in, and the crater doesn't give you anything on that drive in.
No.
So you drive, it's densely vegetated, massive trees. You can't see 10 meters into the bush on either side.
You almost expect to see a gorilla in there somewhere.
Yeah, so you drive up and then you get to this clearing and this viewpoint, and it's mind blowing.
It's incredible.
It is absolutely incredible.
I don't think anything prepares you for that. We've actually started a thing now where we blindfold some of the guests just to walk them up to the edge and then sort of take the blindfold off, because it really is spectacular.
Yeah, it is phenomenal. And I mean, it leaves you speechless. And I think it was similar to my trips last year, having dreamt of visiting these places, and then when you're finally there, it's a very overwhelming feeling.
Yeah.
Which is very, very cool, and I know the guests loved it as well.
Yeah.
So we took a couple of photographs there, just took in the sights, and then started our descent into the crater.
I think the nice thing is also we got there quite early, so we could literally go straight down into the crater and sort of get all the cameras ready and start photographing right from the word go. What were your initial thoughts, going down the crater, the sheer volume of animals around it? Did you expect it to be like that, or did you think, is this real? Is this normal?
Yeah, from what I'd heard, I expected to see 1 or 2 animals.
Yeah.
But driving down, there's so much going on visually speaking. You've got the incredible view. And then as you're driving down, it's literally there's animals everywhere you look.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So driving down, and in terms of photographic opportunities, you do. I find myself at points where you're not quite sure where to look.
Yeah.
There's just you do a 360. There's something to photograph everywhere.
Yeah.
So the sheer volume of animals. It does. It's got a surreal feel to it. I mean, you've got to kind of pinch yourself and say, "Is what I'm looking at real?"
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely incredible.
Yeah. I also find, I mean, a lot of people knock the Ngorongoro Crater for like having too many vehicles and being too busy and things. Honestly, I mean, like when Mon and I were there on the first trip, it was very busy, but I found a lot of the times the vehicles would literally stop at sightings maybe for 5 minutes and then move on. And we had quite a few occasions where it was just us in the sighting, whether it be with lions or elephants, whatever it may be. Quite often it was just us, maybe one or two other vehicles there. So,
and I think, sorry to interrupt, I think the crater, what helps us is that there's so much going on.
Yeah.
It's not like you're in an area where one part of lions is found and that's the lions for the day.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to go and see them, so it's a bit of vehicle chaos. It wasn't like that at all. I think there's so much going on around you that vehicles tend to spread out. And like you said, I mean, I didn't feel pressured in any of our sightings that there's too many vehicles or that the vehicles were having an impact on the animals. Yeah.
And we then only spent 2 nights at Sopa Lodge. So the next day we did a full day there. A lot of people often think, they want to go to the crater for 3, 4, 5 nights. Personally, I feel like a day and a half in the crater is more than enough. I think on that full day we covered most of the crater. And it's actually very diverse. You might think an area that's relatively small, it's just sort of open plains and that's it. But I remember what struck me the first time is just how diverse the crater actually is. When you go through those open plains and all of a sudden, I mean, that spot where we had lunch, you come across this sort of open little lake with hippos in there. You can get out and have lunch. And then you get through that little fever tree forest. It's very diverse, but I think like a day and a half in the crater is enough time. I don't think I wouldn't be able to.
Look, I think you could, if you really wanted to, you could do 2-3 days there and just take it easy. Right. But like you said, I mean, the diversity there, it's incredible because as you look, like you mentioned, it's just open flats. But when you're driving around the edges, you're going up and down these small hills, and the landscape changes so much.
Yeah. Right, so then from the crater, we then took a drive to Ndutu through the villages. We wanted to take a bit of a shortcut, but because of the amount of rain that we had sort of a week earlier, the roads were absolute mess. But it's one of my favorite drives going from the crater to Ndutu, just because of the transition. You get through these Maasai villages, where you see like cattle all over the place and like the Maasai walking around and kids playing around, and then all of a sudden that sort of disappears and you start seeing a little bit more zebra and cattle sort of almost interacting.
Maasai, zebras, then the odd wildebeest, and then there's still people in amongst herds of wildebeest. So what I really enjoyed about the first part of that trip was obviously in this day and age there's a lot of the villages that have become quite commercial, but I didn't quite get that feeling driving through. You don't take photos of people. It's for me it was refreshing because that's raw Africa, which was really, really cool.
Absolutely, it's amazing to see. And then I mean, as we got into,
but firstly, sorry to interrupt, our plan for the day was to drive, because it is a fairly lengthy drive. Our drive was to get into Ndutu and then be at camp at about 12:30.
That was
have a relaxing day.
That was the plan.
And have a relaxing day.
What time did we get into camp?
Probably 6:30.
So I mean, as we drove in, I mean I don't even know how to describe the numbers of wildebeest that were around there. It was I don't know, maybe hundreds of thousands. Massive herds. But then obviously, like you mentioned, we wanted to get into camp, and on our way there we got a call of a leopard.
Cheetah first,
that's right. We had a cheetah first, and then we had a leopard in a tree, which I can't even remember how many hours we waited with that.
No, we were there for a good 2-3 hours, I would say.
Good 2-3 hours. Now, in the back of my mind, so just to let you know what sort of went through my thought process, like Trevor mentioned, we wanted to get to camp, have lunch there. On the previous group that I hosted with Marlon, we had phenomenal sightings of 2 lionesses with 8 cubs in the marsh at Ndutu.
Yeah.
So when we were sitting with this leopard, I was thinking to myself, please leopard just come down the tree so we can get down to the marsh.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope that they would still be there, but I mean, like the amount of predators that you have around Ndutu and around that marsh, you never know. I mean, anything could happen. So eventually this leopard went down. I think it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which actually worked out perfectly.
Yeah.
We then headed straight to the marsh
Yeah.
to try and get those lion cubs. What were your thoughts when you had those little ones cruising about?
So once again, I mean, like having guided in that before as well, there's 8 cubs, right? So you look at it's shared between 2 females. You look at the survival rate. On average, only 1 out of 4 survive.
Yeah.
You had all 8 on the previous trip with Marlon,
Yeah.
and just from the drive in, I knew that there was predators everywhere.
Yeah.
Hyenas, leopards, other lions, all of that. And driving there, I was still, we had this fantastic sighting of the leopard and the cheetah previously, and I was thinking, what are we going to drive into? We haven't gotten any updates over the last week since you left of what's actually gone down. Are they still being kept there? Have they moved away? Are they alive?
Yeah.
So driving there, I was still. I mean, we all chatted to our guests and said we're going to head to the marsh and we're going to hopefully find this lioness for these cubs. But in the back of my mind as well, I don't want to sell it and say we're going to see 8 cubs. It's going to be amazing. They're going to be running everywhere. And just for myself as well, I'm trying to just keep the energy levels down, just keep calm and make sure that everybody's on the same page. And I remember we drove down and we stopped and there was a male lion and a female lion lying in the shade. It was still quite warm. You didn't. Right. I don't think you guys came there. You carried on for the cubs. And so I just while you guys were driving around,
they were not far from where those cubs. They were just on the other side.
They were just on the other side.
Right,
so I was trying to look at what these 2 are going to do. If we don't have the cubs, what are they going to do? Are they a mating pair? Are they going to move around? It's still relatively warm. And then we got the radio call from you guys, and that you guys were with the cubs, and all of them were there. And I just abandoned my plan. I was like, okay, we're going. And driving there, they were all in the shade. They were suckling, and I think it was an incredible welcome. They weren't doing too much when we first arrived, but they were suckling. They were growling with each other. The females were still passed out sleeping. But great introduction, and that first afternoon with them just got better.
Boy, those shutters were going like ballistic. A million miles an hour.
Ballistic. Because also now, Johan and I had this plan of it had been a long day of travel, and our plan was to be at camp at 12:30, and now we're sitting there and it's 5:30. These cubs are still suckling. We've had it was epic. There was a point where a couple of the cubs moved away from the females and very inquisitively came and had a look at us and posed beautifully. And I thought, yes, this is a great way to end the afternoon. I think, Johan, let's call it. Let's go settle in while it's still light at camp. And literally, as we decided that. We were about to pull out, the 2 females got up.
That's right.
And they started walking in towards the marsh, towards that big clearing. And once again, we abandoned the plan of going home, and we thought we'll stick with them. And the light just got better and better. I just remember the beautiful golden light.
Light pops through those
and
clouds.
These 2 lionesses walking through this massive clearing, no grass, with these little cubs jogging behind, all complaining.
Incredible.
Yes, unbelievable.
But I think that was also one of the exciting things during our whole time in Ndutu. So we used to, previously again, we used to do 4 nights in Ndutu. This year we decided to do 5 because it is that epic. And one of the big advantages for us then was that those cubs, we could always bank on them being there. So that was great. I think we headed back there that morning.
We did.
The first morning.
The first morning, I think that...
Was that with the wildebeest, with the baby wildebeest?
It's all blending into one. Let's say yes.
Let's say yes for now, just for the sake of this podcast and the video. But that what went down that morning, I mean, it was very difficult to watch. I mean, we left camp very, very early to try and get to the marsh, sort of even before the sun got up.
I think that's one thing to highlight as well. Sorry, before you continue with your story, is where our camp's positioned.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, we were 15 minutes from the marsh. So I mean, you're getting the best light, and you're in that marsh, and there's so much going on.
It is. That place is just. It always delivers. That marsh is phenomenal. But we got to the marsh like before the sun got up, very early in the morning. There's beautiful colors coming through. You had these pinks and purples. When we got to the sighting, I didn't know what was going on. We just had all these cubs, a pile of cubs sort of on top of each other. And the next minute, this baby wildebeest that had obviously been abandoned by the herd, which happens often during this migration. I mean, like we mentioned, you've got hundreds of thousands of wildebeest. A couple of babies are going to go missing. This baby wildebeest just sort of stood up. I mean, the legs still shaking.
Yeah.
It was so difficult to watch.
Yeah.
But the interaction, I mean, I've never seen anything like that. I mean, this poor little baby wildebeest being surrounded by two adult, I think it was 2 or 3 adult, three adult lionesses, and these 8 cubs. And it was phenomenal. I remember like a few times this baby wildebeest actually went and head-butted one of the adult lionesses.
Which is the last thing I would ever want to do.
I mean, it carried on maybe for like 4 or 5 minutes, but it felt like hours.
Yeah.
It was one of the most difficult things to watch. But at the same time, it was probably a very valuable lesson for these little lion cubs. How to take it down. Eventually, the lioness did take down the baby wildebeest and then dragged it on to like a little open grass patch where they carried on feeding. What were the reactions in your vehicle? I know, like my vehicle, I sort of encourage people to carry on shooting, but also to just look and take it in, because a lot of the times, I think the great images, and I know all of our guests got it, is this baby wildebeest standing by itself, and then you have sort of in the background you have this lioness with these with this intent in her eyes walking towards her. There's no blood or guts or anything, but you kind of know what's going to happen. And I think those images were the winning shots. Once you get sort of the kill and dragging it and the blood and guts that goes with it, no one's really going to do anything with those photos, I don't think. What were the reactions in your vehicle?
It's always a difficult thing to see, and I mean, guiding as well, it's something you don't get used to it. So chatting to the guests on the vehicle, just said, obviously take photos. The photographs that you are taking are, even just a single photograph, it's telling the story. That's essentially what you want to do with your photography. But I also, just reminded them that this is raw nature. Whether we're here or not, it happens. Absolutely. And I think it's a privilege for us to be in that position, whether you're struggling to watch it or not, but to be in that position and to be able to observe that kind of animal behavior. It's stuff that a lot of people will only ever see on TV.
Absolutely.
And now you're sitting here in person, real life, you're watching it and you're photographing it, and you've got the pictures to tell the story. So I just said to them, as hard as it is, keep taking photographs. And then we had a bit of a discussion after the sighting had calmed down a bit, just to make sure that everybody was okay. And appreciated the story behind it and what went down there. Because I think in the moment it is difficult to watch, but as time went on, you start to understand it a bit and you can process it.
It's never easy. But so we had phenomenal sightings of these lion cubs. There'll be lots of images that we'll post on them. But tell us, tell everyone about, and it's one of the things I love about the safari. I mean, it is very tiring, but what I love about it is the full days that we spend out there.
You can't not do full days.
No.
Because I also, most of the other safari, I've done a few where you spend the odd day, full day out in the field. But I think there's just so much going on that you can't. I mean, if you go back, you feel like you're missing out. Because there's something always happening. It may be action, it may be sitting and waiting patiently. I mean, I remember one day where we found cheetah. I think that we found one first and they met up. That's two brothers. And we were hoping to sit with them and watch them hunt. And at the end of it, I think we ended up spending 7 hours with them, 7 hours in the day, and it's not easy. So I know I mentioned to everyone, but it's you put in the time and you'll get the rewards. So following them, there was lots of wildebeest and baby wildebeest all around us, and we thought, okay, well, it's going to happen. And it's those kind of situations where you don't want to leave, although it's hot at midday, these cheetahs are hungry, but they pass out in the shade. But you don't want to leave, you come back in an hour or two, and they're sitting on a kill and you've missed the action.
Exactly.
And so I know in my vehicle, we got to a point where we were following them and they were on the move, and there was a fallen over tree.
That's right, yeah.
And I said to everyone on the vehicle, and at this point they were still moving, they were heading straight to this fallen over tree, and there was a big herd of wildebeest in the distance. And I said to them, guys, the shot that we're looking for is when these two cheetahs climb onto this fallen over tree.
Right,
it's a beautiful background. And the shot that we want is when they're both looking at us standing on this fallen over tree. And everybody got super excited, and literally 30 seconds after I said that, they found shade, and they stayed there for like 5 hours. We went, we had breakfast, we came back, and then there was another time, I think, when we were going to go for lunch, and I said, guys, they're not going to do anything. Let's go for lunch. Let's go for lunch quickly and come back, because people were, I mean, it was about 1 o'clock. People were starting to get hungry. I thought, it's been hot. These cheetahs have done nothing. Let's just go for 20 minutes, have lunch, come back, and then we'll spend the afternoon with them. And I had a moment of panic. I don't know if you remember, but everybody went on my call. We left, we had lunch, and we came back, and there was no cheetah under the tree. And my heart sank, and I could just, everybody in my vehicle looking at me, your vehicle looking at me, and I just wanted to curl up into a little ball. But luckily, they'd only walked 50 meters and found another bit of shade. But now, I mean, I've got to say, hats off to the guests for being patient. It's not an easy thing to do. You're sitting, it's really, really warm, and there's not much going on. And 5-6 hours into it, you start to get a bit despondent and want to move on. But I mean, we had committed to it, and later on that day they got up, but briefly, so we still wanted them to hunt, but they got up and they walked to this fallen over tree. Finally, they both climbed up in beautiful light. There wasn't many other vehicles around, and we all got the shot. And
it was like 2 minutes of magic.
It was 2 minutes of magic out of 7 hours. And I just remember getting back to camp that night and chatting around the dinner table, and everybody saying how incredible the day was. They're like, oh, we've never waited this long for something. But it was two minutes of greatness. And I mean, everybody got the shot. Everybody was happy. And I think that's another important thing to mention is having that vision. So having something that you want to capture, look around, see what the surroundings look like, and try and think of an image that you want. And we waited 7 hours for that shot. Everybody got it. Everybody was happy, and everybody appreciated the day.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, like you mentioned, it's a big thumbs up to everyone that joined us, because I think it was one of our first nights. It was at Sopa. I remember sort of sitting at dinner, chatting to all the guests, and sort of just getting an idea of what images they wanted to create. And I remember everyone was going around with this image, that image, and one of the things that the guests really wanted to see was cheetah hunting. You know, so everyone, like, they had that mindset before we even got there, and we also understood what the guests wanted. You know, if cheetah hunting wasn't on the list, I don't know if we would have waited 7 hours. But anyway, so the cheetah, they didn't hunt that particular afternoon, but then what happened the next morning, I'm a firm believer that nature sort of like pays you when you have patience out in the field. And the next morning, I think we spent time with the two male cheetahs again. It wasn't as long. I think it was like maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours. And then eventually they did take down a baby wildebeest. It was a bit fast, so we couldn't really get images.
No, but I think they had a couple of failed hunts leading up to that point. So I think that's also something to keep in mind is what stood out to me is that you see how they work together. They stalk, they run, and I mean, to finally have them take down a wildebeest calf after 7 hours the previous day, an hour and a half, 2 hours that day. We spent so much time with them, the guests even named them. I think it was Larry and Bruce or something like that. A lot of things goes on in a vehicle when you spend 7 hours with an animal, that's for sure. And then I think another thing, just coming back to the patience thing, I think that's probably one word that sums up the safari for me is the amount of patience that the guests had that joined us. Do you remember that? I can't remember which day it was, but with that lioness in a tree at Ndutu. So that's also, if you guys have been following some images of Ndutu, you would know that around that Lake Ndutu, Lake Masek area, the lions are known to climb the trees. And that's something that we've been wanting to photograph for quite a while, sort of during the trip, looking for these lions in the trees. We eventually got one lioness,
And I think we also got to her like early. I think it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, because I remember the middle part of that day, we were driving around looking for cheetah.
Yeah.
This was before our 7-hour wait.
Yes.
And we were driving around. We had lunch and we got a call on the radio.
That's right.
And yeah, I think we got there at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah. So we waited there. There's a few times where she got up and everyone was like excited and she would go back down again. We even had bets in the vehicle, sort of what time she's going to come down.
I remember, yeah.
And I think, like, we spoke to the guys, we pushed the limit a little bit from sort of the time that we had to leave to get back to camp. I think we called it at like 6:15. We said, okay, 6:15, we're gonna make our way back to the camp. I think she got down at like 6:13 or something. It was literally like the last minute.
Yeah.
She decided to come down. The energy in the vehicle and at camp was phenomenal.
Yeah, it was incredible. And I think once again, I remember us setting up the shot as well.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful tree trunk at an angle.
Yes.
And we made sure that everybody was sorted and ready for the photograph constantly. Because when you're waiting for 3 hours, that's what you do.
Absolutely.
But the energy, firstly, a line in a tree, I would have been happy just with that.
Yeah.
The way that she was sitting in the tree, I know that all the guests got great shots of that. So even if she hadn't come down, it's still special. You go to these areas and there's some iconic shots that you want, and a lioness in a tree in Ndutu is one of them.
Absolutely.
But I think it was a bonus to have her come down, and once again, especially because you and I had been chatting to the guests and saying this is the shot that we're after.
Yeah.
Are you all ready?
Yeah.
And then her coming down, literally, the last moment, and everybody getting the shot.
Absolutely. And I think those images where you wait for a particular shot and you plan it out, I think it's got so much more value to people rather than sort of coming around the corner, there's something, photographing it and then moving on. We spoke a little bit about the camp, the Sikia mobile camp, about the location of it. What about the feel of the camp?
If I think of a classic African camp, that's what it is.
Yeah,
that's what it is. You've got the tents are beautiful. It's very, very nice. But I think just the feel of the camp, you're out in the middle of nowhere. The sounds that you hear at night.
Oh man, we had lions like
every night. But I think once again the staff were great, and the camp. It is a mobile camp, but it's got everything that you need.
Yeah.
It's got everything that you need.
I think that's one of the things I love is the sounds. When Marlon comes back, you must ask him about what happened to him walking when Ahina took a wildebeest calf, and Marlon decided to go out with his torch to go investigate, and his torch died, and he fell into a hole. But it's a very funny story. So he was covered in mud, but I'll let him tell you the whole story.
Okay. Good.
Then from Tarangire we moved on to
from
Ndutu we moved on to Namiri Plains. Now this is the first year we've included Namiri Plains. What were your thoughts coming into
that first afternoon or that first day? I think we were extremely lucky with what we saw, but obviously now we get it was the last part of the trip. And this area is very well known for the lions on the koppies on the rocks. Yeah. And once again, you don't want to get your hopes up because anything can happen. Yeah. So going into it very open-minded, I had an idea of what we could see. I know that you had a good trip with Marlon there as well. Yeah. Good and bad with the rain. But going in very open-minded. I think our first afternoon we got another lioness in a tree.
That's right, yeah.
We've got a cheetah with youngsters.
Yes.
We got lions, and more lions.
Yeah, lots of lions.
Lots of lions. But I think driving through there, it's refreshing. And if you just look at the whole trip, it's so diverse in terms of landscape. And to finish off there, it's mind-blowing. It's similar to the Mara in that, as far as the eye can see, it's just big open plains. And then you've got these little rocky outcrops that emerge randomly. Yeah. And literally every rock that we drove past on that first afternoon, I was like, if there's a lion on any of these, that's going to be spectacular.
It's going to be amazing. When was the first time we saw lions on a rock? I'm trying to
The
next day. We had
the first day we saw, but it was quite difficult. It was midday.
Oh yes.
It was very warm, and the lions were lying quite sheltered.
Yeah.
But even that first day, we saw a lioness hunting a wildebeest. Wildebeest. She was unsuccessful, and then we turned around, and out of the rocks came more lion cubs. I think that one thing with lions this trip is that we saw a lion do everything it's known to do.
Yeah.
Suckling, hunting, climbing trees, climbing rocks, mating.
Yeah.
We heard them calling. It was literally everything a lion does. We saw it, which was really, really cool.
And then I think it was the next day we had this pride of, I can't even remember how many there were. I think it was like 6 or 7 of them.
6 or 7, yeah.
On the rocks. What were your initial thoughts from I'm talking purely photographic now, in photographing these lions on the rocks? Because there's a lot going on. There's a lot of the time people's first sort of instinct almost is to go nice and close. Did you find it difficult to compose and expose?
I think from a photographic guide point of view, it was nice. There's the initial excitement. I mean, I know when my vehicle got there, I kind of, they were resting on the rocks, and I just gave them 5-10 minutes just to take photographs, digest it, help them with settings. And I think that also, being my first time there and photographing lions on rocks like that, it gave me time just to assess the situation.
Yeah. For sure.
And I know you mentioned it on the trip, and looking through photos now, those wider shots are much better than the close-ups. Because the close-ups, I mean, we in the Sabi Sands, you occasionally get a lion on a rock.
Yeah.
So how do you differentiate between the two when it's close up? Whereas even that first day, I think there was one point where you mentioned, guys, put your wide angle lenses on.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you do that, it just puts everything in perspective.
It's
a whole nother ball game. And that afternoon was also special in that, because I know we drove quite quickly to get there because there was actually a storm building.
Yes.
And we were worried that the lines were going to come down with a bit of rain. And we got there and we had some beautiful light. It was quite tricky. I think it was an eye-opener not only for myself but for guests as well in terms of settings, because it changes.
It challenges you.
It changes, your exposure's up and down constantly. And if you're not aware of it, I mean, you can snap away and look at them later and be very upset with yourself. But I remember that afternoon putting wide angle lenses on and just seeing the excitement on the guests' faces as well. In my vehicle, taking a photo, look here, awesome. And then because you towards the end of the trip, you can also see how the guests will start thinking about what shots next, what can I get you. And one of the guests actually said, there's a storm building. Look at imagine those clouds move behind these rocks, and we have these lines with this big storm build up. And I was like, 100% right. It's a great way of looking at it. And that happened. We had these dark, stormy, moody clouds behind, and we had this beautiful golden light on the lines on the rocks. It's almost too good to be true. It's special.
But it's also it's waiting for that moment. The lions were sleeping. There wasn't much happening, and we would have quite a few vehicles that would stop, look at it, and then move on after 5 or 10 minutes. But I think, and that's the difference. And I know Andrew is also doing a trip to the Koppies now in May, actually from the 31st of May to the 10th of June, focusing specifically with these lines on the Koppies. One of the beautiful things is, like you said, waiting for, I mean, you can see in the afternoons these clouds are building, these storms are building, and I mean, when those stormy clouds come over those above those lines, I mean, the magic that goes down, the photographic potential is endless there.
It
really is
huge.
endless.
And I think Andrew's trip as well, okay, we had just lions on it, but I mean, you can get a leopard on there, cheetah on there as well.
Oh, we prayed for cheetah.
So I mean, the opportunities are endless.
So then, sort of by the second to last day, we had worked through almost all the images that the guests wanted to get. I mean, we had, like Trevor mentioned, we had lions doing everything they possibly could. The one thing that was missing though was a male lion on the
And I know that was one thing that Jason really, really wanted. And we had seen quite a few males, but just none really on the rocks.
I don't know if you remember, we had those two males they were in the grass. There were 2 or 3 males. They were in the grass, close to those koppies.
Just having seen 80 odd lions, two males in the grass.
But
close to the koppies, yes.
Close to those koppies.
Yeah.
And we eventually they started moving towards us, and we looked at each other and we were like, oh my goodness, they're going to go up.
Yeah.
The rock slanted beautifully.
Like a 45 degree
45 degree angle. And we said, these lions are going to go up these rocks. And we waited there, positioned ourselves perfectly. And it was just like the perfect story that unfolded in front of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Lost for words.
Yeah.
That was the one day we did decide to go back to camp. So we had these lions.
So we had one male go up.
Yeah.
Early on.
Yes.
And then we didn't really have much planned for that day.
No.
But we decided to go back to camp. You're right.
We decided to go back to camp, and our plan was then we said
come back.
We're going to come back in the afternoon, and these lions are going to come down exactly that same 45 degree angle. We went for lunch. I think we went out again about 3:30, and once again we waited there. It was literally like last minute.
Yeah, because I remember the females were also lying up top, and we got. I mean, almost as we got there. I think that's also one thing that stood out to me was, knowing lions here, South Africa, when they sleep, they sleep. Whereas there, the females, we pretty much, when we spent time with them, there was always one sitting up or one going up, one coming down. So there's always something happening, which was quite strange just because of how hot it was.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened this afternoon. I think within 20 minutes of us being there, 5 or 6 of the 5 females came walking down. And I mean, those shots were great as well, because once again, we had these beautiful white puffy clouds behind them.
Yeah.
But we also knew that there was still a male sleeping up
Yes.
there. And that was the target for the afternoon. And I know at this point Jason was quite anxious, but you put in the time and you'll get the rewards. And once again, I think it was because the male was quite interested in the female, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's right.
And there was one point where we were sitting there and it was getting close to the time where we had to head home, and we were positioned perfectly, and Johan and his guests went, you guys wanted to go and have a look.
Yeah, because we were so paranoid that we're going to miss something, and he goes down a different...
Because they can go down the other side, and if they do, then we're just sitting there for free.
Exactly.
And I just remember sitting parked and watching Johan's car go round, suddenly brake lights, and then just reverse, all the way back.
All hell broke loose. I mean, there was shouting and screaming and everything. Like, it was absolute chaos for like a few seconds, but luckily it all worked out, and we got in position just in time for them to go down. Which again, after that, the energy in the vehicle that drive back, I just remember people couldn't stop looking at the back of their cameras. There was laughter. There was the energy at night was incredible around the dinner table. Jason even got up and danced with the local staff at the camp, which was entertaining in itself. What were so the camp we stayed at, Elani Plains. It's a new camp, also again a Nasikia camp. How did you enjoy Elani?
Also very nice. It's a relatively small camp, very well finished. The rooms are beautiful, nice and big and spacious. No complaints. So really, really nice. The food was also very, very good. Very impressed with the food.
I think it's the perfect place to end off what is a fantastic safari. Do you know what the total number of different individual lions were that we saw?
I know it's 80 odd. I don't know an exact number.
So 84.
84.
So guys,
84.
This is 84 different individual lions. So this is not going past the same lions over and over again.
And just keep in mind that we had periods where we'd spend 3, 4, 5 hours with a certain set of lions. So 84. And eventually I think the guides must have thought we from a different planet, because we said to them we don't want to see lions. Unless they're on a rock or in a tree, we don't want to see lions. I mean, we drove past, I remember, I think it was like the second last morning, we drove past, I don't know how many prides of lions. If they're walking in the grass, we'd literally drive past them, because you can only take so many photos of that's it. Because it gets to that point where you are after a specific shot, and you can afford to be. I mean, it's not nothing against the lions, but I mean, the what we saw lions do and the shots that we had gotten of them, you start to look for those specific shots.
And the amount of different cheetahs we saw.
I would say some 22, 23.
So 26.
26.
26, again, different individual cheetahs. So, guys, that's phenomenal. Remember that's over 12 days.
But still.
Yeah, but it's a lot.
It's
a lot of animals.
Yeah.
It's a lot of animals. Okay, our dates for next year for this Serengeti Migration Safari, the dates are live on the website. The first safari will run from the 27th of February till the 10th of March. I'm hosting that with Mike. I can't wait to see what Mike's reaction is going to be. I think he's also gonna love it, and it's been great to sort of to see your reaction and your passion and excitement during the whole trip. And then me and you will be hosting another one, 11th to 23rd of March.
Can't wait.
Super excited for that, guys. If you want to join us next year, get in touch with us. Trevor, what's your email address?
Just trevor@wild-i.co.za.
Okay, and on Instagram, where can people get a hold
of you? It's just all lowercase, Trevor McCall-Peat, one word.
Okay, perfect. And then if you'd like to get in touch with me via email, it's Johan, JOHAN, @wild-eye.co.za, or on Instagram, Johan van Zyl Photography. Get in touch with us, and then we can secure your spot on next year's safari. It's going to be epic. It's the same itinerary, so it's going to be phenomenal.
Yeah.
Trev, thank you so much, man. It was great catching up.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
I look forward to seeing all your photos. Have you managed to get through all of them?
Still processing.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of processing taking place. But guys, stay tuned on Instagram. There's gonna be some awesome videos and photos coming your way. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us. Hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jan.
Cheers from my side.
Cheers, everyone.